In games, much like in life, most experiences are better enjoyed with friends. Whether you're all huddled around a tiny CRT TV accusing your friend of screen peeking after killing you for the 10th time, or shouting at your fancy HD telly after Noob Flair 420 XOXO has spawn camped you for the 20th time, the concept of multiplayer has been ingrained in gaming since time immemorial. This is what games are all about: having fun with your mates and avoiding the temptation to launch a pointy N64 controller at them. Despite the well-trodden solitary stereotype of the hashtag gamer, even the very first games were made with more than one player in mind. Surprisingly, Pong wasn't a smash hit just for its award-winning narrative, you know? Of course, the dawn of Broadband helped connect players like never before, with many titles setting the trends for online play, but the industry was innovating long before your Call of Duty's, DOTAs and Fortnites. Remember split screen? Game Boy link cables? Arcades? What about thrilling play-by-mail bouts of chess? No, we're not making this up. This actually did happen, kids. Simpler times. Hope you're ready to crank that dial up and dust down that old multi-tap, because I'm Ben from TripleJump and here are 10 video games that revolutionized multiplayer. Number 10. Table Tennis, 1972. We thought it best to go chronologically in this list, so let's start from the very beginning. Remember the historical landmark that was Atari's Pong? Well, swiftly unremember it because it was a shameless rip-off of a title that released earlier in 1972 for the Magnavox Odyssey called Table Tennis. Everything you thought you knew was a lie. Although in fairness, they're both shameless rip-offs of Tennis for Two, the infamous progenitor of Pong created by physicist William Higginbottom all the way back in 1958. And that's not even technically the first video game ever created. Researchers across various institutions in the 50s all dabbled with mind-blowing computer technology, not to eventually send people to the moon, but to kill some hours playing digital versions of chess, drafts, or noughts and crosses. Damn procrastinating students. Crucially, these were all two-player games, but they were always limited to one location. In 1961, Steve Russell, alongside colleagues at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, created Space War, a simple two-player space combat game which would later migrate across the US and abroad. But multiplayer gaming wouldn't be commercially available until 1972's Table Tennis, one of many titles included on Game Cart number 1 for the groundbreaking Magnavox Odyssey. There's not much to say about the premise of the game itself. It's Pong in all but name, but it was a milestone moment in gaming history, setting a strong precedent for community play even this early on. Number 9. Street Fighter, 1987. 15 years on from the Magnavox Odyssey, and game enthusiasts were frequently congregating in the hallowed arcade halls, engaged in bizarre rituals like feeding coins to machines for high scores. Amazingly, this unusual new social setting really took off. Whether it was taking turns on UFO intruders or hungry pizza bloke, teaming up on early cooperative trailblazers like Atari's Fire Truck from 1978, or blasting through dungeons in 1985's Gauntlet, there was finally a real sense of community around gaming. Of all the new genres spawned in those noisy, neon-soaked parlors, the fighting sim is arguably the most synonymous with arcade gaming, and Street Fighter launched it all with an emphatic, sure you can. I'm not gonna do the voice, come on. While not the first of its kind, Sega's heavyweight champ was the earliest bare-bones example of two-player fisticuffs back in 1976. Street Fighter's debut in 1987 sparked a whole new culture of friendly sparring, serious tournaments, and a next-level dedication to killer combos. Street Fighter's legacy is undeniable, influencing so many other classic fighting franchises, and is still going strong today. We also can't ignore the impact of legendary beat-em-up Double Dragon, which did for co-op play what Street Fighter did for competitive matchups. Truly, a golden age of arcade. Number 8. WARCRAFT, Orcs and Humans, 1994. It's tough being a Warcraft 1 orc, always blamed for nasty deeds, frequently used as cannon fodder, and constantly being harassed by a big pointer in the sky. Stop poking me! In 1994, a decade before that online game what everyone played, Warcraft, Orcs and Humans propelled real-time strategy into the mainstream, taking lessons from early pioneers like 1981's Utopia, 1989's Herzog's Phi, and that title that coined the term RTS, Dune 2. If that wasn't enough, Warcraft then boldly advanced into the fog of war that was online multiplayer. It wasn't the first to develop local network play or even the first online game. The 1984 proto-MMO Island of Kesmar GOLDENEYE takes that illustrious crown, but it was the first for a genre that would become defined by its competitive online scene. The satisfying balance of fantasy warfare and resource management proved infinitely more compelling when pitting your wits and your clicks against a worthy human foe, even with the limited internet speeds of the day. Blizzard's flagship series would later set two other colossal trends in online gaming, one being the MOBA with 2003's Defense of the Ancients mod for WARCRAFT 3, and the other, well, probably not important really. Number 7. QUAKE, 1996. Ask anyone about the pioneers of first-person shooters and they'll likely mention Doom or Wolfenstein. Yet, while both Doom and Wolfenstein have seen successful modern revivals, Quake's been left gathering dust on the mantelpiece, which is simply criminal for literally the founder of the online deathmatch. Doom may have preceded Quake by a couple of years, offering local network deathmatches for 4 players and later providing rudimentary online matchmaking in 1994 with their Dwango service, that's dial-up wide area network game operation, but the concept of frantic, high-octane firefights really took off with Quake, particularly with the Quake World Update released in 1996, which allowed people with dial-up modems to play online with much higher responsiveness. This miracle of coding was the turning point for online gaming and helped accentuate the quirks of Quake's slick game engine, with bizarre tricks like strafe jumping, bunny hopping, and rocket jumps becoming normalized in future multiplayer hits. Yearly tournaments like QuakeCon starting from 1996 even inspired the earliest forms of esports, multiplayer as an actual professional job. And you can't get more influential than that. Number 6. GoldenEye 007, 1997. Let's go over the ground rules one more time. Playing on facility, first to 10, slappers only, no picking odd job, and if I catch you looking at my screen again, Peter, you're not invited to my birthday party. The N64 classic GoldenEye 007 holds a special place in people's hearts for many reasons, not least for influencing the early days of 3D console gaming. But the real formula for success came with the incredible split-screen multiplayer mode, allowing up to 4 players to huddle around a TV and shoot 7 shades of strawberry jam out of each other for hours on end. As PC titles made strides online, the console market doubled down on instant, easy gaming for friends and family, and the N64's 4 controller ports helped achieve exactly that, with hits like Mario Kart, Smash Bros, Mario Party, and even a few non-Mario-related titles too. GoldenEye undoubtedly set the benchmark for couch multiplayer, with a wide variety of weapons, characters, maps, and game types providing incredible replay value for friends and family. And famously, the multiplayer portion almost wasn't made, being worked on in secret without Nintendo's knowledge and slotted in just a few months before release. Good job, 007. Number 5. Halo 2, 2004. Ironically, for Bungie's landmark sequel, Master Chief didn't actually finish the fight with Halo 2, but started about a billion more fights, bringing the world together through a mutual love of kill streaks and unsportsmanlike teabagging. For the first time on consoles, you could easily jump into matchmaking and find a thriving community thanks to Xbox Live. Consoles had flirted with Lady Internet for the last decade, with Nintendo's Satellaview in 1995 to the Dreamcast's built-in SegaNet, the cutesy puzzler Choo Choo Rocket being their debut online hit. Xbox Live launched officially in 2002, introducing the concept of gamer tags, friends lists, and real-time voice chat supported by early online games like Unreal Championship and NFL Fever 2003. It wasn't until 2004, however, that Halo 2 pushed the service into the stratosphere, offering the endless, thrilling firefights on a host of impeccably designed maps with slick controls and game balance that's still the gold standard today. Without Halo 2, we wouldn't have seen the Xbox 360, Call of Duty wouldn't be nearly as dominant, and we'd still be typing our grievances about that one player hogging the energy sword rather than crying helplessly into the mic. Number 4. World of Warcraft, 2004. A game that not only transformed the MMO genre but transcended gaming itself, taking the world by storm. Yeah, I suppose it's worth a mention. World of Warcraft introduced thousands of people into gaming, and when every new release is still hopefully labelled a WoW killer well over a decade later, you know you've made something special. But first, yet another history lesson. 80s titles like the previously mentioned Island of Kesmai and the social functionality of 1989's Habitat laid the groundwork for the proper MMOs of the 90s, starting with 1991's Neverwinter Nights and leading on to the early trailblazers like Meridian 59, Ultima Online, and EverQuest. WoW was by no means the first, but its cultural impact cannot be understated. Not because of the often grindy gameplay or even some clever new technology, it was all about community. An existing franchise with an accessible subscription model that offered free trial periods often meant that the player base quickly grew to astronomical levels and stayed there thanks to constant updates still seen today. This meant everyone could find their place in a guild of like-minded players to help tackle a tricky raid boss, search for rare loot drops, or simply goof around. This was the real secret to WoW's staggering success, with over 100 million new accounts created and just as many friendships made in the process. Number 3. Destiny, 2014. Just because it had been a while since we'd suffered the dulcet tones of dial-up didn't mean multiplayer games were done innovating by the 2010s. A decade after World of Warcraft defined the massively multiplayer scene, Halo veterans Bungie decided to experiment with their own take on an FPS MMO. The result was Destiny, which sadly took more from the grind-heavy daily quest structure of WoW, neglecting the hundreds of players in one zone aspect, the interesting community part. And thus, the live service game was born, a controversial subgenre that many publishers tried to mimic and few perfected. But in their defense, Destiny succeeded where others failed for one key reason. The actual gameplay was a whole load of fun. The relentless grind was offset by superbly satisfying gunplay and epic firefights, so even though the majority of the experience could only be shared with 2 other people at any one time, it still had millions of players hooked. On the other side of the FPS MMO fence, it's worth paying credence to series like Battlefield and PlanetSide for providing chaotic, action-packed battles filled with hundreds of players, a staggering technical feat in itself. Number 2. JACKBOX Party Pack, 2014. For a while, it felt like simple party games were a relic of the past. Why bother trudging to someone else's house for some Mario Party when I can sit at home and chat to mates online while wrecking noobs in Call of Duty? With so many games ditching split-screen multiplayer and couch co-op, the traditional gaming party piece was in decline. That is, until JACKBOX shook up the formula, using the quintessentially modern tool that is your smartphone to bring back some vintage gaming values. JACKBOX offered a variety of wild and wacky games hosted on one machine but playable by everyone with a phone, a genius move that meant even non-controller savvy normies could get involved. Originally repurposed from a late 90s TV quiz show, You Don't Know Jack, the series boomed in popularity with an almost yearly release since 2014, letting countless friends and family entertain each other with weird trivia, dastardly deceptions, and dubious artistic skills. It even led to a boom in app-assisted gaming, notably seen with Sony's PlayLink, which produced a wonderful, if short-lived, series of party titles. Number 1. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, 2017. Commonly known as PUBG or PUBG, or that janky but cool game what Fortnite ripped off, it's nearly impossible to play a multiplayer game nowadays without seeing the DNA of this plucky little upstart. We're talking, of course, about the Battle Royale mode. You know the score. 100 players, or however many they can fit on a plane, enter an island filled with loot and only one player or team emerges alive and victorious. A brilliant idea, and one that propelled PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds into the latest gaming sensation. Like many entries on this list, there were lesser known, you might say, unknown pioneers that walked so that PUBG could run very fast, away from an ever-closing circle of death. Inspired by the novels and movies of The Hunger Games and its Japanese precursor Battle Royale, survival games mods would begin to appear in games like Minecraft and Arma 2 as early as 2012. One such modder, Brendan Green aka PlayerUnknown, developed a similar game mode for Arma 3 and H1Z1 before releasing the standalone PUBG in March 2017. The rest is history, with Fortnite following soon after in September of 2017, promptly stealing the show thanks to a more stable game engine and free-to-play model. Approximately 7 billion copycats came afterwards, from high-profile additions to Call of Duty and Fallout 76 to wacky, genre-bending interpretations like Super Animal Royale and the pirate-themed Maelstrom. Even Tetris had a go, and if your game managed to influence the age-old formula of Tetris, we'd say you've earned your place in the halls of multiplayer history.